Hey ho, let's go. Happy Monday, everyone. Hope you're well wherever you are. I am Sean Pugsley Martin. This is episode 34 of Pugsley Pit. And as we always do this time of the show, we ask ourselves the weekly question, where else would you rather be than right here, right now? Happy morning to you. The misery continues, folks. The Raiders and Huskers are a combined 1-6. The A's are the worst team in baseball. But today we're going to try and change the luck around. But before we do that, by way of introduction, I'm a freelance sports writer for the Albany Times-Union, avid sports enthusiast, a big-time homer for my teams without apologies. You can follow the show, as always, on Twitter at Pugsley's Pit and take in the podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Before we get to our guest coming up later in the My World segment, just coffee in here, I swear. The ugliness that is my sports world continues, so send beer. Now, since misery is the mood of the day, or at least the moment, we're gonna cleanse ourselves here. We're gonna we have a guest. We're gonna talk some Husker football. We didn't lose this week. That's awesome. And with that note, let's bring in Dave from @HuskGuys on Twitter. Dave, we didn't lose. How was your Saturday? Was it relaxing?
First off, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was incredibly relaxing until the end, to be honest with you. I think I love college football start to finish. I'm a diehard fan. I'll watch any game, 15 straight hours of it. And especially not having to watch the heartache of Husker football is great. But I will say, and this is probably a bad way to kick the show off, but when Adrian Martinez decided to march right down the throat of Oklahoma and beat them, that was a little bit of that one hurt me. That one hit me in a lot of weird ways. I've been a huge Adrian Martinez fan for a long time, and he just could not. I mean, you look at his numbers for Nebraska, he never once did that one time in 4 years for Nebraska. He does it effortlessly against the team that beat the doors off of us the week before. So I had a great Saturday until Saturday night, and then I didn't sleep Saturday night again. I felt like I almost lost again because of that. So that was a little deflating. But other than that, great Saturday.
Yeah, you know what? I saw you tweet about that, and then I flipped the game on. I didn't have it on before, and Adrian Martinez, I loved his effort. I loved his dedication. He played through injuries, and then you'd have a play, and you'd be like, wow, this guy could win the Heisman. And then the next play, he'd trip over himself and fumble the ball inches before his knee touched the ground and turn it over, and it was maddening. So a couple things I want to get to. So let's stay on that. In 5 or 10 years, how rough is this Scott Frost era going to look? Because guys leave, and like Martinez is having a nice year at Kansas State, and none of the issues that he had at Lincoln. I'm not blaming Scott Frost for Martinez's fumbles, but this has got to fall in coaching, right?
Yeah, and Wan'Dale Robinson's the other one. He left Nebraska and became a first-round NFL draft pick, and is probably going to have a great career for the Giants. So I think that's another one that sticks close to home, where Frost was able to recruit these guys who are fantastic players. To be clear, those are like two of the top guys. There's plenty of others that have done nothing once they've left, like the Luke McCaffreys of the world. But I would say that on the top end, Adrian hurts, Wan'Dale hurts. It's hard to say. Adrian just the most top of mind of like what happened to that guy, and how is it truly just the pressure at Nebraska was crippling to him? Because you could rattle off 15 different times he screwed up at the end of the game. Michigan, he just fumbles the ball. Michigan State, he throws a game-losing interception in overtime. Minnesota, he takes a game-losing safety to lose the game. You can list off 20 of those. And you're just waiting for that to happen against Oklahoma, and he just never did. You're just like, oh, my God, this was the guy that we'd been waiting 4 years for, and it just never came. It just was crippling meltdown after crippling meltdown. Both those Colorado losses, I think the Frost crippling meltdowns are very well documented, but Adrian was right there with them. Crippling interceptions and safeties and fumbles and drop balls and runs out of bounds, all sorts of terrible stuff. So, that one hit me weird on Saturday night, because everyone's blaming it on coaching. I'm like, how can every player just fall apart when they play for us?
Thank you. And that's something I'm going to say, because look, the Frost era is going to be, nobody was happier when they hired him than I was. Okay. it didn't work and it wasn't going to work. And in a few years, the one thing I don't want, stories are going to come out, right? About Frost wasn't doing this. And that's unfortunate because look, he won us a national title as a player. He's always part of the family. You had to go. And the Georgia Southern loss sealed it. But it can't all, you just said it can't all be on him. Not every Martinez turnover can be on the coach. But even some of this other stuff, is it just what's the state of the program right now? Like you talent wise, or is some of it up here with the team? Is it just a mental thing?
Yeah, that's kind of what I come back to is I think, it's like everybody's blaming Frost for everything. It's like he didn't drop the ball for Adrian to lose the game against Michigan. Like he's physically out there, and he was, if you look at so many of those close games, there's guys running wide open that Adrian never saw or the players never saw. So there's plenty of things where you're like, he schemed him open, but something is weird and something is off. And this start to the year, the other thing that ruined my Saturday was Northwestern losing to Miami, Ohio. I was like, Northwestern's probably the worst team in Power 5 and we're somehow below them, which is like remarkable. So, I think that the close losses for a long time you could defend for us because you're like, wow, we're playing with Michigan. We're playing with Michigan State. We almost beat Oklahoma. But over time, when you lose 10 straight close games, it's not bad luck. It's systemic failure. And so I think there was, as Frost left, there really wasn't anybody saying, no, we got to keep him. I think everyone is ready for a clean break and a clean change. And, the state of the program, that's a big question we can unpack because I think – we're certainly in a not great place right now, but I have optimism that there's quick turnaround potential as you look around the country and you look at how many good candidates there are for coach, for quick turnarounds. I mean, Dave Aranda's a guy that's become pretty popular name. He took over a 1-11 Baylor and they were 10-2 last year and they're pretty darn good this year. I watched most of that game on Saturday. So, there's candidates like him. There's Urban Meyers out there. There's Luke Fickles. There's Mark Stoops, who's, he's got Kentucky of all teams in the top 6.
You're right.
Lance Leipold's got Kansas undefeated. So, Kansas is a dumpster fire of a team forever and he's got them 4-0. So I just feel like there's the quick potential turnaround with the transfer portal and NIL and the amount of money that Nebraska has in their program that I'm sure everybody thinks we're like totally broken, but I just see this. There's so many coaches who are able to come in and do a quick turnaround by just a mental change, get some new players in from a transfer portal standpoint, kind of change the entire mindset of the program. And our schedules are just not that hard. That's the other thing that kind of kills me. It's like we aren't exactly playing Alabama every week. We're losing to Georgia Southern. So the bar is pretty low from can Dave Aranda come in here and beat Georgia Southern and then Northwestern and then Indiana? Probably. And I'll bet you he can do it in 1 year.
Yeah, the Northwestern loss, they got kind of pushed around that day. That's even just watching Northwestern and how they're doing now. It just blows my mind even more. But I think trying to find a positive, right? You got to be pretty good to be hanging in all these one-score games, especially last year against the best of the Big Ten. And that's why I say is some of it mental. Is the culture just a losing culture now? You don't know how to win games, but at some point you got to figure it out. And that's on the coaches. That's on the players. What did you think of Eric Chinander getting let go last week? I thought they were woefully out of position, especially the Georgia Southern game. If you disagree with me, go ahead. I didn't like what I saw. I liked the effort, but not the results.
No, I mean, it's hard to argue. I mean, we have statistically the worst defense in the country, and it's statistically the worst defense in Nebraska football history. So it's hard to argue to keep him. I just have an overall confusion, I would say, on what happened. Last year's defense wasn't elite, but it was pretty good. Yeah. And, we stopped Oklahoma. We stopped Michigan, who went to the playoff. You stopped Michigan State. If you remember that game, they didn't have a first down the entire second half. And that was a team that finished with 10 wins. So, or 9 or 10 wins, however many they finished with. Kenneth Walker, who turned out to an NFL running back who we stopped no problem. And so I don't quite understand how we have a lot of the same players that came back. You lose JoJo Doman and a couple other guys. I just don't, I have an overall confusion. I don't get it. How did we go from going toe-to-toe with Michigan and Michigan State and Oklahoma and Wisconsin and everybody to Georgia Southern putting up 700 yards? I guess so it's hard to argue. I don't know what happened in the offseason. I don't know if Chinander just lost the players. I don't know if the players just aren't good. But I would say our defense trended positively the last 4 years. And then this year it's like they all just forgot how to tackle. They're wildly out of position. They aren't physical. it's been overall extremely confusing to watch, more than anything for me.
Well,
I think
I'll tell you what.
Yeah, I think we're all just blindsided by it. I thought we'd start 7-1. And here we are, 1-3, staring down like a 1-11 season. I've been like blindsided by this team. I had no idea.
Now, let's talk about the rest of the year. Mickey Joseph is a Husker guy. By all accounts, his players love him. Guys he brings in, he's a good recruiter. What does he need to do to get this job? I got to imagine they're going to go outside. You just listed a ton of names, and Matt Campbell's still a hot name in Iowa State. It's going to be hard for Mickey Joseph to get this job. What do you think he has to do to secure it?
I just don't I mean, he's not set up very well. He just showed up in January, February. He's got only a handful of players that he recruited. The defensive coordinator's gone, the head coach is gone that recruited all these guys. I unfortunately don't think he's set up very well. I love the guy. I loved it. I think he's a phenomenal recruiter, and you'd love to keep him on to lead in that capacity. I just think it's going to be really hard. You've watched the games. Like, how are you going to go from allowing 655 yards to Georgia Southern to stopping Wisconsin or Michigan or anybody? It's just not set up very well. There's the potential, right? Like, again, the schedule's not that hard. If you beat Indiana and Rutgers and Purdue and Illinois, 4 straight wins that everybody sort of expected coming into the season we could win out through October, before you get into that gauntlet of the finishing games. So, certainly if he shows some signs of progress and if he's able to like stop the bleeding and pull out a win against, these next 3 to 4 games, he's in he's a great place, and people love him. The players love him. He's a homegrown guy. I think he's got all that set up for him, but he's inheriting kind of the mess that he's got. So it's going to be pretty tough, I would think. But it's his to lose. I think people want him to do it. People want him to succeed. But I do think there's a lot of coaches out here that have the head coaching experience, that have turned around programs, like the Arandas of the world, that, if they've turned around programs, they have experience as head coaches that he doesn't quite have.
All right. Let's talk Indiana real quick for this Saturday. At home, coming off a bye week. Hopefully they were able to take a couple days and kind of get their house in order a little bit, at least on the coaching staff wise. What's your expectation for this week? Is it more the same? Do I need to go to the beverage center for the game?
I guarantee you it's going to be. I think it's going to be painful. We came out as 3.5-point favorites, which is kind of shocking to me. It's almost like Vegas hasn't watched any of our games yet. So I think that's interesting. It actually just moved to 4 this morning. They got their doors blown off them by Cincinnati. And I think Cincinnati's a pretty good team, but they also won 3 games. So they won their first 3 games, and that's, against inferior opponents.
But they won the games.
They won the games, and that's, I see a lot of people talk about like, oh, all they did was beat inferior opponents. That you see anybody that beats an inferior opponent. We're not beating inferior opponents. We're not beating anybody. So, I think that's concerning that they have that, ability to beat inferior opponents. I think it's going to be, I don't know. I think it's going to be a hard one to watch. It's at Nebraska, so you hope that like some of that momentum can carry through. I do think here's the optimistic side of me. I actually, if you look at our offense, our defense, I can barely watch. I have to, you talk about the beverage center. I have to leave the house anytime that our defense is playing. But on the offensive side of the ball, I actually think Casey Thompson is a pretty darn good quarterback. I think Trey Palmer's probably our best wide receiver since Kenny Bell. And I think Anthony Grant's probably our best running back since Samir. So I think those 3 together, I know our offensive line is woeful right now, but if those 3 can take over a game and finally kind of play up to their potential, you've seen sparks of it. They played pretty well in every game except Oklahoma. Trey's good. Casey's good. So, you'd like to think at some point they can take over a game and Anthony Grant can run for $150 or $160 again. Like he was on pace for 1,000 yards until he struggled against Oklahoma. So the optimistic side of me's got can we go, can we just put up a bunch of points? Because you're going to need 42 points to beat anybody the rest of the season. And if Casey can figure that out, then that's good for us.
Yeah. Now we talked about the next coach. Fickle, I'm surprised he's still at Cincinnati. I thought he would have left. It just kind of didn't match up last year. I would love it if he would come. Now, before we got on, I asked you if you're an Urban guy, and you are, and I'm not. So
let's go.
Here's why I don't think one. I think he's just a jackass. And
yes,
okay, and he is. He wins a ton of games though. And that's the allure. My problem is I think where is he? Is he the same person now as he was a few years ago? Because you look at Jacksonville, they're playing good football in the NFL now. That was a disaster waiting to happen. Do you think the reason I don't think they'll bring in Urban Meyer is almost nothing to do with football. It has to do with personality. Bo Pelini's defense got lit up in some big games toward the end, but Bo Pelini, to me, got fired at least 50% because he swore all the time.
Yeah.
And then you bring in Mike Riley, the anti-Bo Pelini, and he couldn't do either one. He didn't, but he did it without the cussing. Do you think how much of Urban Meyer's perceived character matters in Lincoln, or do people just want to win games now?
I get it. I think the character matters a ton, and I think at the end of the day, Trev's probably going to look at that. And I tweet out a bunch of stuff about Urban Meyer and get a ton of backlash. So I get it. There's a lot of concern there. I just, when it comes down to it, and one of the greatest coaches in the history of college football is available and is not coaching somewhere, and you can get him, I think you make a run at him and see what happens. And I think there's multiple sides of Urban Meyer, right? There's, he's got 3 titles. He's 65-15 at Florida. He won, where did he go at Ohio State? Yeah, 83-9 at Ohio State, 54-4 in the Big Ten. He knows how to win in the Big Ten. He knows how to recruit in the Big Ten. He knows how to take a program to the next level. He's a maniacal recruiter. He's the best recruiter that's maybe ever existed.
And he gets kids to the NFL.
Gets kids to the NFL. He knows how to recruit. He knows how to sell. He knows how to win. He knows how to coach. Basically all the things that we haven't had in this program in the last 10, 15, 20 years, right? He's got that maniacalness and that's, especially as you throw out a name like Matt Campbell, right? He goes 7-5, 8-4 every year. And when he comes here, that's what he's going to do. Hey, if he does that, that's going to feel like winning the Super Bowl going 8-4. That's going to feel like an absolute, like the greatest thing of all time. But Matt Campbell's not a guy who's going to win 12. Urban is, he's done it. He will do it again. I write off the NFL side of it. Saban didn't succeed in the NFL. A lot of college guys don't succeed in the NFL. I think he's got the character issues that it's going to be hard to get behind. But if he's able to kind of put on, the part of Urban that is interesting is if he can check the ego and if he can come here for like a rehab tour, like this guy doesn't want to end his career as a complete, he's a laughing stock right now in a lot of ways, right? Like everybody in Jacksonville's laughing at him. The NFL's laughing at him. Like people aren't remembering that he was one of the greatest coaches of all time, that if he wants to come to Nebraska with the nice fans where we can lift him up and he can go through a rehab tour and actually be a nice guy while winning. I don't know if he's got it in him, but if he does and he ends his career like flipping around Nebraska as opposed to ending his career as a laughingstock and a disgrace in the NFL, that to me is like the interesting component of it is, can he repent for all of his past misdeeds by coming here and, becoming a winning coach? I don't know, but it's an interesting question.
I think with Urban, if he does come, let's say he comes, you get an immediate turnaround. I think he's here 2 years, 3 max. He's going to go for that next best job, to go to another level. That's my opinion. I don't know. But you're actually pulling me into the Urban to Lincoln train here. You make sense in that, you may not get the guy you got. I mean, look, leopards don't change their spots, but maybe he learned from Jacksonville. I don't know. But you got to get some. You got to win some games here. And I will give him credit for this. He put on a heck of an audition at the pregame show before the Oklahoma.
He really did.
And Nebraska had the best fans on the road. That he fed the whole thing, and he said all the right things, and they certainly gave him a big cheer.
Yeah, and I think that's what becomes interesting for him is, to your point, does he go on to take another big job? Maybe, but he's 58, so he's not young. And I think he's kind of, to me, it's like this is your last crack. Saban was 58 when he took over Alabama. So like he's got potentially another 5-10 years in him. But I feel like at that age, you kind of want to take one last crack. So it's like, can Nebraska be that last crack for him to go through it? And I think it's less about him going and taking another job. The concern would be like, at what point does he self-destruct or does his health become an issue? Because that's what, the health issue became a thing at Ohio State. It became a thing at Florida, the self-destruction tendencies become a thing. But man, if he can flip us around and turn us and get it to a good place, he gets some good recruits in here, and it could be interesting.
Even if it's a couple of years stopgap, to me, I'll take. I don't. There's other guys I want, but yeah, you're talking about what's the end of the day? I want my football team to win. He's won everywhere he goes. He turned Utah into something. Florida. he had a different cast of characters down there. They had a
Yeah.
lot going on, but at the end of the day, I guess Tebow offset the Aaron Hernandez's a little bit in morality.
Yeah, but I think about, like, look, as you said, being a Nebraska football fan for a long time, and so have I. Like, I understand that there's a need to have like a nice guy and a moral guy at the head of your program. We tried that with Mike Riley, it didn't work, right? So that to me is there an issue there. And you look at some of our best teams of all time. Who do we have? Lawrence Phillips, Abdul Muhammad. You had these guys who had the edge to them. They got in trouble with the law. They had, they're pushing the edge of the envelope. And that's what he did in Florida, right? You get, it's part of the game where if you have a lot of like, church going kids, it'd be great to have them, but they're probably not going to like take you to the next level the way that, some of those guys who are, who have that killer edge to them, can play for. So I kind of anchor on a little bit of that of, you guys look at the 90s, like who did we have? We had, Christian Peter and Jason Peter and Lawrence Phillips. And a lot of these guys was just that crazy, like psycho edge to them that allowed them to be really successful.
Speaking of the glory days, I don't think you hear a lot that they're gone for good. You hear that in the media. I don't believe it because I think you're still the only game in the whole state. The fan base is always going to be there. I mean, the fan base has hung in there through this awful period. We're teetering on it. But if you come back and start winning, where do you start? You start with winning the Big Ten West, which does not have any world beaters in it every year. You have good teams, but they're all the same,
Yeah.
I think it's possible to get back. Do you agree with that, or is it just going to be a middling program with a chance to compete for a conference title every now and then?
I think it's an interesting question. I think to win at the level that we were winning in the 80s and 90s, where you're essentially competing for a national title and winning 11 to 12 games every single year.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't get all the way back there, but to your point, like, can we win the Big Ten West? Wisconsin's got 2 losses already. It's only September. Iowa's can't score a touchdown to save their lives. Like that. You're telling me we can't climb to the top of the Big Ten West. I think that's when I get like in my darkest days coming out of some of these losses. You're like, can we just beat Indiana and Illinois and Iowa and Wisconsin? Like that can't be that hard. For a coach to come in here and be able to do that. And you look at like even where we started in the Big Ten when we came in. We played in the Big Ten championship in 2012, and we handily beat pretty much everybody. Bo has beaten everybody in the Big Ten, no problem. That to me is like the baseline that I feel like there's at least the opportunity for us with NIL coming. That NIL is sort of what I hang my hat on of like there is the unbelievable fan support and the unbelievable financial support. And you probably saw like Trev Alberts and, we've got multiple hundreds of millions of dollars coming in from the media deals. So you've got the media rights deals. You've got NIL coming in. You've got, Rabbits fan support that's going to sell out every single game for the rest of forever. So I guess at some point you hope we can at least regain our position in the top of the Big Ten West or, at least close to the Big Ten, because that to me feels very attainable. Beating Purdue and Illinois and Indiana and Rutgers and Maryland, that feels extremely attainable for me. So when I'm in my darkest times, I just think about like that kind of stuff. Like that just doesn't feel that. It feels very like to get to Alabama's level. That feels like a different stratosphere. Yeah. But beating an Iowa team that's only scored like 3 touchdowns this year, that feels like something we should be able to at least aspire to do in the near term.
Yeah. Hey, you brought up Lawrence Phillips. I go back to way back when. I defended Tom Osborne when he let Phillips come back to the team for this reason. I said, well, you're not going to know for a few years how it works out. Okay, it worked out horribly. The way I read it was Osborne was trying to help Phillips and keeping him around the program rather than kicking him out of school and sending him back to L.A. To give him a chance at the NFL. He didn't need Lawrence Phillips that year to win a national title. Amon Green was a beast as a freshman. Do you agree with that sentiment, or I'm just apologizing for Tom Osborne for a decision that didn't work out?
No, I think it's, there was a recent Nick Saban quote probably a couple of years ago. He kind of said something similar. This was even like before a lot of the cancel culture stuff that happens, but there's such a quick hook from society on a kid makes a mistake and you're like, kick him off the team, kick him out of school, get him out of here. Like he should never exist anymore. And Saban had said this, and Osborne always said this for a long time of like, exactly like you're saying, if you send this kid back to the streets, his life's over. Yeah. And the best opportunity for him to rehab his life as an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old as a young kid is in that type of a disciplinary environment, in a football environment with coaches who care about him and father figures who care about him. Lawrence had such a troubled upbringing in foster care and, bouncing around in LA and a lot of different foster cares that I do genuinely feel that Osborne felt he could be that father figure for him. And it worked for the time being. It ended up, his demons caught up to him. But, I agree with that sentiment that those greatest coaches, the Osbornes and the Sabins of the world, they do have that anchor on, like, we can't just cast these kids off from society. Maurice Washington was another one that we tried to rehab him in Nebraska. It just didn't work out. And now he's doing okay at Grambling State. But, I think there's plenty of examples of kids like that society is so quick to cast off and just say, kick him out of here, like kick him out of school. He doesn't exist here, but they're young. I think that's what always kind of comes back to for college kids. Like, they're 18 to 22 years old. That's young. They make a ton of stupid mistakes, some way worse than others. But, if you're just kind of throwing them to the wolves right away at 18, like, what's the rest of their life going to be if you don't give them that opportunity?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And you know what? It didn't work out. But, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I still applaud Osborne for at least giving him a chance. So, hey, Dave, how can people find you and follow you?
Yeah, I would love if everybody followed us on HuskGuys. It's on the screen there at HuskGuys. We've been around for 10 years. We try to bring the best we can. We try to bring as much positive energy as we can into the program. We sort of were founded on relentless positivity and relentless optimism that every year we're going to win the national championship. And so, every year we kind of get punched in the face, but we at least have fun doing it. We've built up, we now have the largest following of any fan account across Husker Nation. So give us a follow. We'd love to hear from you guys.
That's awesome. Let's get some positivity. Let's get something to cheer about. I'm showing up to work on Mondays just miserable. The Raiders 0-3 and the Huskers 1-3.
It's tough, man. It's definitely like, building an entire following around like relentless positivity and then just getting like punched in the stomach every single Saturday for a decade has been pretty tough. But you're like, show up every day and you're like, maybe we could beat Indiana. I don't know. Maybe we can. Like, maybe we beat them. Who knows?
They have football, right? All right.
Who knows?
All right, buddy. Have a great day. Thanks for jumping on.
All right, Sean. Thanks.
Bye now. All right, enjoyed that, Dave, from at HuskGuys on Twitter. Okay, let's get to the rest. I read last night report that there might have been a behind closed doors meeting last night with Mark Davis and Josh McDaniels. Raiders are 0-3. I mean, folks, we're the only winless team in football. Raider Nation. Yesterday's game was a winnable game. You got Tennessee. They lost to the home to the Giants, and I'm in Giants territory, and they're off. And Tennessee lost to them. And then they went out to Buffalo and got their doors blown off on Monday night. Yesterday was terrible. The play calling was awful. It was uneven. 3rd and 18, screen pass. They weren't even deep. You weren't even playing for field position at that point. It's not like we're deep in our territory or anything like that. The defense in the first half, touchdown. They got it figured out. No points in the second half, but you dug a 24-10 hole. It was 21-0, or they had 21 on the board, not 21-0, but they had 21 on the board before we could blink. Where's Chandler Jones? Were the naysayers right about him? That he had one big game last week with his 5 sacks against Tennessee? And he's not the same player? I mean, Max has given us great effort. I'm never going to say anything bad about him. But the defense dug a big hole in the offense. Couldn't climb out. And Derek Carr's going to get people banging on him because that's what people do. But Darren Waller, you got a nice catch. The ball hits you in the hands on that goal line play. In and out of the hands. I know it was a missile. I know it was thrown hard. You got to catch that ball. It hits off Waller and gets intercepted in the end zone by the Titans to snuff out a drive. So the good news for the Raiders is the Broncos are coming to town this week. You know how I feel about the Broncos. I hate the Broncos. I'm never going to give them any credit, but actually I don't think they're very good. So my concern is that the Raiders make the Bronco offense look good. And then because that just seems to be the way. And the Huskers do that to me too, since we're on Husker Day today. But you got to win this game. I mean, you're 0-3. Only team in the league without a win. Jesus, let's go. Because guess what? After Denver at home, you go to Kansas City before a bye week. You want to go into that bye week going 5? I don't. Hell, win it for me. Give me something good to cheer for. Please. Baseball, the A's, hey, look, we got a week and a half left. We knew it was going to be a dumpster fire of a season, and it has been. But you know what? You got a lot of young kids are kind of enjoying the watch, and hopefully some better days are coming in the next couple of years for the A's. I want to shout out Albert Pujols, man, 700. That was awesome to watch. Good for him. He's been a great player all these years, and in my fantasy baseball league that's been around 30, I think this is our 33rd year. Albert Pujols, I got to bring this up. You know who I'm talking to out there. Sorry. After Pujols' rookie year, he was traded in the offseason in our keeper league for Roy Oswalt straight up. So I had a little fun with my buddy this weekend when Albert got to 700 for the worst trade in league history. Hey, Aaron Judge watch. Tough weekend. The Red Sox didn't want to pitch to him too much Friday night or Thursday night, whatever that was, until that ninth inning ball that was about a foot or two away. A friend of our program, Chris Vitale, was at that weekend series. It was fun watching him on that from ball9sports.com. So probably the only good thing in my sporting world right now, my youth soccer team I'm coaching. Got our first win the other day. So we now have as many wins as the A's and the Raiders and the Huskers combined, which is just terrible. So anyway, next week, NFL, Major League Baseball playoff preview. We'll get back after it then. So until that time, let's go Big Red. Let's go Raider Nation. And get ready for the Bruins. Let's take the ice. Have a great week, everyone.